Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, August 20th, 2022, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm host most Will Buchanan. How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we do get started, guys, we do like to report on the news, although sometimes we do try to watch our language, but words do fly. At the same time, there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, 'tis the weekend, guys, and what do we have to get into? Well, the attack on education just never seems to let up, doesn't it? I mean, for the simple fact of the matter, we are seeing, if you guys were watching the midweek edition, that we just reported that since 2020, over 600,000 plus teachers have resigned from their positions. Gee, I mean, it can't be anything to do with all the crazy legalities and just removal of things, right? I mean, one would think, but let's look at the first story. Wisconsin Public School District is affirming bans on teachers displaying pride materials or identifying their pronouns in emails. There is a ban on teachers currently in Madison, Wisconsin, on displaying LGBTQ plus or pride materials in their classrooms or writing pronouns following a contentious board meeting in which parents and students criticized the policy. They said, quote unquote, this bans partisan politics, sectarian religious views, or selfish propaganda. We live in a world where politics are highlighted and it puts people in uncomfortable positions, quoted by their superintendent, by the superintendent that was in a July board meeting. This also prohibits teachers from banning other deemed potentially contentious, like "Make America Great Again" or "Black Lives Matter," which you gotta love that they threw that in there. Like that's gonna make everything feel better. We're banning everything. That's what they're doing, and it amazes me so. Where, if you're probably wondering, cross necklaces are still allowed because forget the fact that they're trying to ban certain things, and they've been doing that. I've been saying this for the longest time. Whenever you hear Black Lives Matter, what did you always hear? Well, all lives matter and blue lives matter, which the latter two was literally bullshit, but it was put in place to sit there and counteract something that is still a big issue in our country. Even more so that you guys remember about 2 podcasts ago, well, there was a teacher that was displaying African-American figures and leaders in his classroom. And he was told by school staffing that they need to be removed from his classroom. Prominent African-American figures of history. Your Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, your Mary McLeod Bethune, your Booker T. Washingtons, your Frederick Douglass. We can keep going down the line. Your W.E.B. Du Bois. I can keep going. All of those were removed because the staff said that it make people uncomfortable. We just now got through watching. You just saw an article that in Madison, Wisconsin, they are trying to ban anything LGBTQ plus related because it puts people in uncomfortable positions. How? My thing is, how in the world does acknowledging different preferences out in the world make people uncomfortable? How? Oh, a person's LGBTQ plus. Okay, cool. I can still have a conversation with them. I can still have a meal with them. I can still play video games. I can still play cards. I can still have intellectual and intriguing conversations. Just because they are different than me, which is the whole crux, literally, of America's problem. That I don't know why we celebrate differences as a strength, but when it comes down to it, we hate differences to the point to where some people out there of the Mayo variety feel uncomfortable. Why? Because there's less of you and more of them. because the progressive nature of our country is changing to something you don't recognize because you were forced to live to something that you may or may not have agreed to, but eventually you decide to conform to it. I mean, what else out there makes you so afraid of just saying, yes, LGBTQ plus people, you exist. Black Lives Matter, you exist. Why is it that when it comes down to it, no one ever questions the Mayo side of history, or the Mayo side of issues, or the Mayo side of what they're going through? But anything else beyond the Mayo seems to be a little too uncomfortable for Mayo people. Yes, I said Mayo people, because those are the only ones that could be uncomfortable with this. Everyone else, we're all different because we've all learned to embrace it versus reject it. And in the words of one of my favorite one of my favorite movies, Cool Runnings, people always don't like or people hate what's different. And again, it's always those same people in power that will always try to hate on things that are different, but they'll cite policy. Much like the next story I got. We're literally a school, and this is another reason why I have an issue with religious schools is because of what this next story is about to show.
From what I read, it's not a new policy, but that was the first time I was made aware of the policy in that email.
This Hillsborough County mother of a 16-year-old lesbian daughter asked to conceal her identity for fear of harassment.
I am accepting. I love my children. I don't care. But there's families that I know of that really have more than a hard time with their children being gay, and it's sad.
All of her children have attended the Grace Christian School in Valrico, but after reading Administrator Barry McKean's June 6th email, she says she couldn't send her youngest daughter back there for her junior year.
I actually respect their opinion, but my daughter's well-being, right, and mental health is more important.
According to the email obtained by NBC News, the school will only refer to students by their sex assigned at birth. It also states any form of homosexuality or transgender identity is, quote, sinful in the sight of God and the church. The email goes on to say, students who are found participating in these lifestyles will be asked to leave the school immediately.
I have to say about that school, there's some loving teachers at that school. There's teachers at that school that know a lot of these children are gay for sure, and they still love them.
This mom says her youngest daughter never faced discrimination at the Grace Christian School, but at times she felt left out. Before enrolling her at another private school, she asked the owner,
"I just want to know if it's Christian based," and he said, "Yes, it is." And I said, "Well, I'm going to tell you up front, my daughter is gay, and I don't know, would that be a problem?" He said, "No, God loves everybody."
Angel and
Yes, God loves everybody, but man has an issue with gay people. I cannot stress this enough. And again, this is my own bias. This is my bias as well, because I still say that religious schools, for all their talk of indoctrination, they're all their talk that we're teaching our kids not to think they're being molded and guided by unsavory characters. In my mind, this is a little bit of my rant. It's always been the Christian schools, I swear up and down, have indoctrinated more, have damaged more students than anybody else. Because amazingly so, in that story, that simply a school has sat there and said, oh, by the way, if you're LGBTQ plus, you're not wanted here. I mean, we love you, but our religion dictates that you're living a sinful life and therefore we can't have you around us. Do you understand how stupid that sounds? It's stupid because if you look at the nature of things, isn't everything all supposed to be about love and acceptance and understanding and, loving people that normally most people would pass on? That's always find it interesting about these schools. Love one another as long as you're not LGBTQ plus. We gotta have a line somewhere. It's even more so that you're pretty much telling a child. I mean, yes, it was a high schooler, but still, what is the message that we're teaching our children? What is the message that we're teaching our children that how can we sit there and say above all else to accept everyone, but we draw a line because someone whose preferences, pronouns, and overall identity is different than us? I still want to know. How is that different? Because in my mind, I'm going to be sitting there and I'm going to be going, what's the point? What's the point of having a school say you're going to accept everybody? Just say you accept everybody by the religion, which is the exact reason why I have an issue with religious schools. Because when it comes down to it, religion will always be before education. That's why I used to cringe. And actually, I still cringe. I still cringe whenever I see these Christian schools or academies. Anything that's always related. Not always had to be Christian. It could be a Catholic school or any other type of religious institution that's running a school. It has always made me cringe because in that world, it's not education first. It's education as an elective, but religion is an imperative. That has always, always, always bothered me. Because what are you saying? In this case, you're pretty much telling a child they can't join your school because they don't fit your Christian lifestyle. I'm sorry. That's utter bullshit. It is. And it's a reason why schools like that should not receive federal funding. They shouldn't. If you're gonna sit there and use your religion and talk politics or things from the pulpit, then you gotta pay the price of admission just like everybody else. But I feel terrible that young woman is literally deciding to make her choice in life, but her choice can't be accepted by others because, well, they follow a book that's been remixed so many times that P. Diddy should have a credit on it. Just saying. But you know what also is crazy? The fact that not only is the fact that this is being introduced in actual private schools and academies. You guys remember this whole thing? Remember the some of y'all still remember the Pledge of Allegiance, you know, I pledge allegiance to this flag for the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation under God, which, by the way, one nation under God wasn't added until the 60s, by the way. But here's the crazy part about that, because a lot of people still believe that we are founded on not only that we are founded under God, but founded under Christian nation. Both things are incorrect. Both things, I mean, even in God we trust, money wasn't added until the late 70s. In God we trust was not on currency until the late 70s. In God we trust, as far as the Pledge of Allegiance, wasn't added to the mid 60s. So no, we weren't founded by a Christian. We weren't founded under God by a Christian nation. We were actually founded by Christian slaves, hustlers, thieves, and killers. But I guess that wouldn't fit well when you're having a whole bunch of children say that. The reason why I point this out, by the way, is because public schools are now receiving In God We Trust poster donations in Texas, of all places. The Hold My Beer competition continues as Texas decides to throw its hat in the ring, where Texas school districts, the same districts that outlawed abortion, the same districts that outlawed CRT, the same districts that have outlawed certain books that can't be put in school libraries, the same districts that have sat there and said what teachers can and cannot teach in public schools. Yes, that state has turned around and received donated posters and framed copies of the In God We Trust motto, saying that they will now be required to be displayed in accordance with the new state law, which quote unquote says that the public elementary or secondary school or institution of higher education must display a durable poster or framed copy of the motto in a conspicuous place. And each building, if the poster or frame copy is donated for display at the school of institution or purchased from private donations and made available to the school or institution. You know what you're pretty much saying right there, folks? In Texas, we want In God We Trust posted everywhere. And yet, these are the same folks that are crying about indoctrination happening. We're seeing indoctrination happen right there. Again, we were not founded on a Christian nation. We were not founded under God. It just sounds nice because enough of the religious people out there have got enough pull, have got enough people, have got enough money to make this happen, especially in heavily conservative states. Because in conservative states, religion and football kind of trade places depending on what month it is. But both of them have always kept the 1 and 2 spots. But it makes no sense. Why do we need In God We Trust when, again, I've said before, our education is in the toilet. Our education hasn't changed since the 60s, 70s. We need a massive overhaul in education. Teachers need everything. This is why I keep saying the entire time. If we had funded our education the same way we fund the Pentagon, I think we would have smarter people and less wars. That's just me. because the whole thing of giving the Pentagon a blank check has helped nothing except those who profiteer from wars. But if we keep cutting education, we're probably going to, at this point, not have much of an educational system, if not one is already lacking. But again, they're worried about making sure that in God we trust is in every school in Texas. Goes to show you. And Texas ain't the only one. But moving right along, guys, I did want to cover this as well. That, of course, we did talk about that the officers that were involved in the raid on that led to the death of Breonna Taylor, well, one of them has been terminated. This individual right here, Sergeant Kyle Meany, as you're seeing posted right there, has just as of now been terminated yesterday by Louisville Police Department. Chief Erica Shields released the following statement, quote unquote, "I made the decision to terminate Sergeant Kyle Meany after careful consideration and not with ease. I fully respect the judicial process and realize Sergeant Murray has yet to be heard before a jury of his peers. That being said, he is facing multiple federal charges after a lengthy investigation by the DOJ." I'm not mad about this. I still think that, again, the fact that the DOJ has to jump in and literally do the job of the Louisville Police Department, have to come in and do the job of the DA, Daniel Cameron, who, by the way, still swears he did the right thing. Not the fact that he already played a part of the raccoon community because he's played to Mitch McConnell, not because of the fact that the Louisville PD actually covered up the entire raid from Jump Street. Because again, if 3 officers who are now indicted, one has already pled guilty, one has actually been fired. At the same time, if these 3 officers are found of falsifying information to get a warrant, a no-knock warrant, which again led to the death of Breonna Taylor through no fault of her own, then the Louisville Police Department should also be held at bay. The DA should also, Mr. Cameron himself, should also be held responsible, because everybody participating in this cover-up that took the Department of Justice to go back and say, wait a second, something's not right. But again, we will follow that story as it goes along. But as I said before, guys, going back to school, however, it is amazing to me that folks still do not realize the impact of what happens in our educational system. Well, hear it from teachers. If you can't believe me, believe teachers.
Back to school, strong new evidence of the political divide at colleges. In our new NBC News Generation Lab survey, almost half say they would most likely not choose a roommate who supported the opposing presidential candidate from the one they backed in 2020. Even more said they probably would not go on a date with someone who voted differently. And the economy is weighing heavily on them. Almost 90% are concerned about the price of gasoline, rent, and food. Which brings us to a top challenge in schools themselves, finding enough teachers, especially amid growing cultural fights. Antonia Hilton returns to South Lake, Texas, where school began this week.
For 7 years, Adam Burns loved his job as a middle school technology teacher in South Lake's Carroll school system.
Hey, cutie pie.
But after members of a conservative political action committee won the majority of seats on the school board, and Texas passed laws restricting how teachers could address racism in the classroom, Adam and his wife, Brandy, who's Black, thought of their 11-year-old son.
Did you feel like you could be true to yourself and stay in this job?
No, not at all.
Adam quit in July, but says Carroll schools haven't found his replacement, and his contract requires him to stay until they do.
My message to other teachers would be to be true to yourself. For the district, I would just say it's time to start listening to the people that you employ.
Given exhaustion and stress from the COVID pandemic, one survey finds as many as 55% of America's educators are considering leaving the profession. In South Lake, Texas, NBC News has covered extensively conflicts and an active federal civil rights investigation into the treatment of minority and LGBTQ children in the Carroll district. 93 out of 577 teachers left that district last year.
Here's 3 teachers that
3 really good teachers.
Amazing
I mean, kids loved us and kids learned from us.
Tim Hamilton taught Spanish for 9 years. A group of residents became outraged after he wore a Black Lives Matter mask and posted about his beliefs on Facebook. Administrators demoted him, and Tim refused to work the new position.
And the almost decade that I spent in the district, that was worthless. That meant nothing to them.
Carroll schools did not comment on any personnel matters regarding the teachers we spoke with. Kim Ross quit last spring after teaching algebra for 13 years.
Part of what we saw and what was happening that kind of made us go, I don't think I can do this anymore, at least for now.
They might fire you for doing this interview.
Well, they can't fire me because I quit.
A new survey found that 70% of Texas teachers are considering leaving the profession entirely, the highest number ever recorded since the survey began in 1980. Ovidia Molina is the president of the Texas State Teachers Association.
Educators are feeling less support, not just from the elected officials who we felt for a long time, but also seeing an increase of lack of support from our parents because of all the political rhetoric that is being thrown around about who we are.
If this continues, what's going to happen to the public schools?
We're going to see a lot more classrooms without teachers. And we're going to see even less people wanting to come into education.
Despite losing 16% of its teachers last year, the Carroll District says it has only 3 open positions currently, which it expects to fill shortly, and it is implementing raises and instructional coaches to help those still there. Adam hopes that his colleagues and his young son understand why he chose to speak out.
Does it upset you to think that this might be the end of the road for you with teaching?
It was a big leap for myself and my family for me to do this, and realizing that I don't feel like there's really a place for me. It's really tough.
Antonia Hilton, NBC.
That's just one state. I can tell you here in Tennessee, and especially in Middle Tennessee, the positions for teachers are already over 70,000. 70,000 open positions for teachers. And that was Texas. Texas itself already lost close to is projected to lose 70% of teachers who are ready to move on. And like I said on TikTok, this was for all the parents that wanted to control public education for your child, this is your fault. This is everything that you wanted. You wanted to sit there and tell someone else who went to school for their profession, who got experience teaching as a teaching assistant or substitute teacher, or however they did get their experience, who developed curriculums, who work with students beyond the bell, actually. You now told them that pretty much everything that they're doing is not up to your lack of education standards. So now, with all these teacher openings out here, and for all these parents that swear up and down that they can do the job better, well, outside of homeschooling, apply. Because teachers have been saying this for the longest time. They are overworked, they are overutilized, they are underpaid, classrooms have been crowded, extracurricular educational programs have been cut, because in some places, some schools don't have a music program, some schools don't have metal or wood or auto shop, some areas do not have a 4-H program, some areas do not have mathletes or roll scholar programs to actually help students go beyond the pale, beyond the normal passive education. Why? Those were all considered extracurricular programs. But sports is still a thing. Sports still allowed in schools, because that's where the money comes in. At the same time, it just blows my mind that teachers have been saying this for decades, and the only thing any parent heard, like in the last 5 months, was CRT, books that their children were reading, and what they're being taught. You ignored a teacher's cries for help, but you saw everything else that was wrong, and you decided that needs to change. Well, guess what, parents who are pretty much for this? You are the teachers now. Good luck. Moving right along, guys, I did want to cover this story as well, because we do know at the beginning of this week, Trump got raided because, again, he held on to classified documents that he did not have classification for after his failure in chief run was done. However, the plot thickens, because not only does Trump swear that he is threatening something, well, now he's only saying it, but his lawyers aren't saying it. They want the actual affidavit, the actual legal document that was used to search Mar-a-Lago. Well, they're wanting it unsealed. But here's what we have so far.
decision in the battle over whether to release the affidavit behind the search warrant of Mar-a-Lago. A Florida judge telling the government to prepare a redacted version of the affidavit it used to justify the search, saying there are portions that can be unsealed, giving the government a week to make redactions to the document. Attorneys for media companies, including NBC News, argue the affidavit should be unsealed, saying not since the Nixon administration had the federal government wielded its power to seize records from a former president in such a public fashion.
It is not the government's job to tell the public what is meaningful in terms of the release of its own information.
But the DOJ forcefully disagreed, saying the investigation is still in its early stages, adding the government is very concerned about the safety of the witnesses in the case whose identities could be compromised if the affidavit is unsealed. NBC's Mark Caputo was there.
What was it like to actually be inside the courtroom today?
You didn't know it was a former president. You would have thought it was a mob boss, because what they're talking about is obstruction of justice. They're talking about how witnesses are threatened and how obstruction of justice could occur if more information is released.
Mr. Trump's lawyers did not make any arguments for or against unsealing the affidavit, but the former president has publicly called for the documents to be unsealed. And today, a Trump spokesperson tweeted, "No redaction should be necessary, and the whole affidavit should be released." As for the documents that were taken from Mar-a-Lago, two law enforcement officials tell NBC News more than a week after the search, agents are still sifting through the large haul of 27 boxes containing 11 sets of classified information. For his part today, Mr. Trump released a link to a memo he sent in 2021 where he purportedly declassified some material. But legal experts say that's irrelevant to the potential crimes prosecutors are investigating. Adding urgency, a source familiar with the matter tells NBC News, inside Trump world, there are discussions about whether to release surveillance video of the search. Eric Trump was asked earlier this week if the footage would be released.
Absolutely, Sean, at the right time.
Meanwhile, in New York today, Alan Weisselberg, the former chief financial officer of the Trump Organization, pleaded guilty to tax fraud charges, admitting he took $1.7 million in untaxed perks, including free rent, school tuition, and multiple Mercedes automobiles. Weisselberg agreed to pay nearly $2 million in taxes and fines and serve 5 months in jail. As a part of the plea deal, Weisselberg is expected to provide information about those business dealings, but not about his former boss.
Kristen, if we can circle back to the search of Mar-a-Lago, the Justice Department has some real concerns about the potential release of surveillance video of the search.
That's right, Lester. A senior DOJ official says they are extremely concerned about the safety of agents whose faces might be exposed by this video, calling the danger real. Still, a source familiar with the former president's deliberations tells me the decision is not imminent.
All right, so a lot to unpack there. Number one, the affidavit. I never can say that word. The affidavit being released. I mean, what do you need to know? Trump took classified information he was not allowed to have outside the White House once his failure in chief run is over. That's it. But I'm not to disagree. Not to agree with the news. The public does have the right to know. But what do you want to know? He took sensitive information on our enemies, on our allies. Did he take possible weapons or nuclear information that he shouldn't know, that he shouldn't have outside the White House? You got to remember, when you're president of the United States, you got access to a lot of stuff that 9 times out of 10, you should not be saying to the public. So I'm just like, if he got caught with it, then good. Do your job. See what he took. Did it violate the Espionage Act? And if it did, charge him accordingly. All I need to know is, did he have classified documents? Yes. Were they found in Mar-a-Lago? Yes. Open and shut case, Johnson. That's the way I feel about it. But I could also see it from the other side. I can see that we need to see what he took. Even though Trump himself tried to sit there and say when he was failure in chief, I declassified this, so therefore I could take it. You would think the whole time Trump was in office, somebody on constitutional law would have told him what he can and cannot do as president. Just because the president turns around and sits there and says, I declassify this, does not make it declassified. There's a whole process on making a top secret document declassified. Because you don't think about declassified documents, 9 times out of 10 they're redacted. I mean, the black lines that you see through, that's redacted. That lets you know that there was sensitive information that you cannot see because you may not have the clearance for, or it's going to be released to the public. That's a declassified document. Saying that I hereby declassify it, no, it doesn't work that way. And again, the whole thing about the surveillance footage, what is he going to show? The FBI raided your home. They did every procedure right. Merrick Garland gave the approval. They did notify the governor of Florida because they have to, and Secret Service was notified before the FBI showed up and coordinated with them. What possibly could you show on that footage that we're not going to see? That you want to show FBI agents? Because that's Trump's MO. Trump's MO, aside from just being a bully, he literally points out people. And just like the journalist said, what other reason could it be for him releasing that footage? Because that footage may show FBI agents' faces. We just got through just this past Wednesday talking about law enforcement is now being targeted by Trump loyalists. There was a guy in full body armor that tried to assault an FBI building. He was taken. FBI offices around the U.S. are now being fortified. Why? Because the same group of people that said Blue Lives Matter and hold the blue line are now the same ones that are attacking law enforcement. And again, Trump is enjoying inciting the violence. He enjoyed on January 6th. I guarantee above all else, he's enjoying it now. Because now he feels like he's got a little rebel faction going on that'll do everything that they can do to get him back to where he once was. Because you don't think he doesn't want to be failure in chief a second time? You are out your mind. But also at the same time, his CFO just got hit with tax fraud. I don't know about you guys, but anybody in Trump's administration, maybe outside of 3 people, I think outside of 3 people's administration, everybody else has went down in flames on indictments, on arrest, and jail time. And his CFO of his Trump organization just now got hit with tax fraud. $2 million in fines and 5 months in prison. Slap on the wrist. Because Lord knows he's probably sitting on a pile of money. But that just goes to show you. The guy who says, I only pick the best people. I only pick the smartest people. I'm the smartest guy I know, so I pick smart people. Every individual he has picked has been fired, has resigned, or arrested. Outside of maybe Sleepy Carl. Probably Sleepy Ben. Ben Carlson is probably the only guy outside of Mike Pence that maybe left that failure in chief administrations unscathed. Maybe. Still waiting. But again, I keep pointing this out every freaking chance I get. That's the simple fact of the matter, folks. There is a lot of, wherever there's smoke, there is a crap load.
Employees in Memphis who were
there is a crap load of fire. And I keep bringing this up that when it comes to Trump, look for the smoke. But the whole thing about him trying to make a big stink about, when I show this video, it's going to show a lot. No. You want to put the FBI agents on blast so they now become targets. Because there's enough of your folks out there who are unhinged who will go after the FBI. And again, they're disrupt. As long as they can disrupt for you, you love, and Trump does. Don't get it twisted. His admiration is dipped in violence. That's the truth. But some business news, guys, before we move on to our feel-good segments of the week. I did want to talk about this one because I just want to know if you guys remember this story about Starbucks. And, Starbucks and their weird conditions about stores that are trying to unionize.
Starbucks tonight firing several employees in Memphis who were seeking to unionize their store. The location, one of dozens nationwide where workers have filed to unionize since December. Reps for Starbucks tonight accusing the Memphis employees of violating policies with fireable offenses, like allowing unauthorized personnel behind the store bar. The union seeking to organize, accusing the company tonight of retaliation.
Yeah, remember that story where they were trying to unionize, and just like every corporation, they can't quote unquote retaliate. So they hire public firms. They bring in their executives to play watchdogs, to check their cameras, to see what these employees are doing. They're trying to find something on them. So therefore, once they go ahead and do it, they can sit there and say, you know what? You're fired. Not because you're trying to start a union. It's because the simple fact of the matter, guys, that you are basically a thorn in our side because Starbucks does not want a union. Corporations as a whole do not want unions. Well, the reason why I played that video, because as of a little bit earlier today, those very same people that were fired, those 7 employees in Memphis, well, they actually got reinstated. It was actually determined by the U.S. District Judge that agreed with the National Labor Relations Board that asked the court to intervene, said Starbucks violated labor law by interfering in workers' right to organize. So again, they actually are going to get their jobs back. It requires Starbucks to offer to reinstate the employees within 5 days. They'll also be required to post a court order in the Memphis store. Of course, Starbucks said, we disagree and we'll appeal. But it's always, to me, it's always been so weird. It has been so weird because it is amazing to me how many times people keep saying, oh, well, you don't need unions. Corporations say it all the time. Rich CEOs say it all the time. You don't need unions because we give you all this. Amazon is the biggest perpetrator of it. Why do you need a union? We pay you the most in your state. We give you benefits on the day one. We give you PTO. We give you reimbursements. Why do you need to unionize? We give you everything that you want. Bullshit. I have said it once. I'll say it again. Unions work because unions as a whole hold corporations accountable. I hate to break it to you, no matter how badass that you think you are, no how smart you are, or how bold or brazen, and the fact that you'll speak out in your company. I don't care how great that you may think you are. You're just one person. Corporations can easily ignore one person. Corporations cannot ignore large numbers. They can't. I mean, just this week, there was a walkout in Amazon in San Bernardino, California. Folks walked off a distribution center there claiming that was really unworkable conditions in the heat. Unheat, not enough water, not enough breaks to go do what they need to do, because Amazon is all about that algorithm. I can never say that word, algorithm. Amazon is always about that algorithm. So, again, imagine if Amazon had a union. Would that change the way you get your shipping? Yeah. But would workers be a lot better off? Yes. I will gladly sacrifice my one-day rush to make sure that the people that work under Amazon get what they need, because that's all workers want. All workers want is to be able to work comfortably and not kill themselves, pee on themselves, or at worst, do damage to their health just to keep a corporation, $1 billion with a B corporation, still running. So again, Starbucks, we're on the cusp. So again, I keep on saying, guys, unions work. If there's not a union, you can always unionize. There's always room for unions, because without them, there's a lot of things we wouldn't have. In this case, not the corporation's attention, because again, corporations will ignore one person. They don't ignore large numbers. But speaking of numbers that I wish that Governor DeSantis has right now, before we get to our last business story, this is a weird one. Remember electoral fraud? I know the word almost sounds ancient. We haven't said electoral fraud since the last election. Well, remember a while back, Governor DeSantis actually set up an election police force? I know it's about as dumb as Space Force. It's about as dumb as the Space Force, but unfortunately, both are real things. He just announced, since its inception that he created sometime last year, that they're going to make a whopping arrest of 20 people.
Created the first ever Office of Election Crimes and Security Office in state government. And the purpose of that was to investigate things like voter fraud and other violations of election law. The state of Florida has charged and is in the process of arresting 20 individuals across the state for voter fraud. These folks voted illegally in this case, and there's going to be other grounds for other prosecutions in the future. They are disqualified from voting because they've been convicted of either murder or sexual assault, and they do not have the right to vote. They have been disenfranchised under Florida law, and Amendment 4 that passed specifically included people that have been convicted of sexual assault and homicide from being able to have an automatic restoration of their voting rights.
Again, 20 people. Remember, they said that they would find, remember when conservatives sat there and said they would find massive amounts of voter fraud, that voter fraud had to be everywhere, that dead people somehow voted, that people got to vote twice, that they were messing with the ballots, that they were doing this and doing that. We're going to find it. And by the way, Trump won Florida by a landslide, if you're wondering, if you remember. 20 people. You're 20 people, which again, the reason for this was because those 27 people were convicted of murder or something or another heinous crime that doesn't fall under the voting rights being restored. Okay, 20 people. I just feel like that's a lot of overkill to go after 20 people, because 20 votes is not even a drop in the bucket in Florida. But again, this is them. To me, this feels like a reach. Feel free in the comments if you say differently. This feels like a reach to me. This feels like you are just simply hoping to justify the reason for an election police force when we just came out of, by far, probably the most safest election in recorded history. That only in Florida, where Florida is claiming that they have fraud charges for illegal voting. The only state. There's not another state out there that's sitting there saying this. Remember, they tried to go up to Arizona, and that got shut down. But in Florida, where DeSantis acts more like a king than a governor, I'm not surprised about this. Even more so that it's 20 people. 20 people. It is so infinitesimally it is so small on the scale of voting. It doesn't even register. It doesn't even register for justification, really. But again, I digress. Florida, the current king of the Hold My Beer competition. The last one I got, guys, before we get to our feel good segment, is more of a shocking one. Dan Price, remember that CEO guy who raised the pay of his workers by $70,000 because he took an almost $7 million pay cut? Is advocating for paying people more, advocating for companies to really take care of its employees instead of basically crapping on them because they're finding better jobs and doing that thing in their nature. Where people, from Facebook to LinkedIn to Twitter shared everything that he was doing. Well, unfortunately, I guess he wasn't as perfect as we thought he was. On Wednesday, there were allegations of misconduct and sexual assault, including several criminal charges. Because of that, as of Wednesday, he did resign from the company that he founded. One of the accusers, a 27-year-old model, came forward and sat there and said that after a short romance last year, Price raped her. Of course, he denied the allegations. However, there is a case going forward of rape of a drug victim involving him, which, again, that is not the only one. 5 other women have definitely came and spoke up. So, therefore, it is starting to take a shape of its own. So, again, that's like, not everybody is perfect as they say they are, but again, it's kind of sad because I myself did like a lot of his views on corporations, the fact of corporate loyalty and the fact that corporations weren't taking care of their employees and that taking the initiative to actually pay employees more. it is a dark light on someone who is advocating for these type of things, only to be found out that, you know, he may or may not have caused a lot of heinous actions. Kind of sucks. It really does, because again, it's always the ones that you don't. It's always the ones that advocate for the positive things are always the ones that seem to be behind the most messed up stuff. Damn. But moving right along, guys, we're going to go into our feel-good segment because usually how the Frack got here, we cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom, and sometimes we lose faith in humanity. But hey, it is the weekend. Hopefully we can send you guys out some good vibrations in these two stories. I hope we'll do just that, especially this first one because, you know, grab the tissues. It's going to make you cry.
Boy taking his first steps to the amazement of his own mom. Dakari Miranda is just 22 months old, but he's already America strong. When Dakari's mom, Dawn, was pregnant, she learned her son had a 1 in a million condition. Doctors told her Dakari would be born without a tibia or shin bone in his right leg, and there was a chance they'd have to amputate that leg. Dakari. 8 months ago, she decided to go through with surgery to give Dakari a better chance.
Catch it.
And it didn't take long. Dakari is already playing with mom, crawling, even going up the stairs. But they were still waiting for one more step. The team at Lurie's Children's Hospital in Chicago made a prosthetic for Dakari, measuring
15.5 for length,
casting, adjusting it just for him. And then this month, the moment they weren't sure would ever happen.
Good. See, that was
Dakari taking his first steps with the help of that prosthetic, and of course, mom.
To see Dakari take his first steps was like breathtaking. It was overjoying. I thought it would never happen. So to see it happen, it was just like, wow. To see him push through and overcome all of the obstacles in his way, I just know he's going to be great.
good job, Dakari.
Love to see it. Thanks so much for watching.
I told you, tearjerker. I had a lot of onion after watching that. It's always cool to actually still see, no matter what, people overcoming. And the next story I got, guys, again, it's just that I don't think stories like this get played enough. But definitely these young men need to be honored for what they did to actually help a stranded motorist. Check it out.
To a daring rescue in Georgia, a group of high school football players rushing to save a woman who was trapped inside her car after a serious crash. Will Reed with more on that for us. Good morning, Will.
Good morning, Robin. To succeed in football, you need teamwork, a not insignificant amount of courage, and you have to move fast. All of those football principles applying to a scary real-life scenario in Rome, Georgia, where dramatic footage shows those football players springing into action.
I knew I had to help her some way. I knew my friend won't feel the same way as me.
Overnight, the high school football players from Georgia who jumped into action to save a woman from a car crash, speaking out to GMA.
Once I seen the car was smoking, I was thinking as if the car was going to blow up.
All I seen was a big old boom. I looked up and I said they got in a wreck. So we just all hopped out. I just knew it was going to be a bad accident.
Captured on school surveillance cameras, a woman's vehicle on a collision course after spinning into oncoming traffic to avoid a truck.
The sound, it was very, very loud. The car was crushed. There was glass everywhere.
The boys racing to respond. The crash right across the street from their school as they were on their way in.
She just repeated saying, help me, help me.
Math teacher Luis Goya was right there too and dialed 911. Describing how bad it was and letting them know about the heroic teens who stepped in.
In panic mode, she was desperate. You can see in the eyes because, the whole accident and smoke coming out in front of her, of the hood. But then you see these angels.
The boys say they did what they had to do and just hope the woman in the crash will be all right.
Reportedly, the woman in the crash was taken to the hospital with cuts and scrapes, but authorities believe she will be okay. Thanks in large part to those football heroes, guys.
And I just want to get that deserves right there. See, it doesn't, those things like that really don't get shown a lot. And that to me was one of those things that need to be shown, that it was selfless, just to make sure the person was okay and they hopped in. Those boys definitely need to be honored. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. So before I get out of here, I do want to say thank you for everybody that watched, that liked, that let people know this was on. I certainly appreciate that. Before I do get out of here, guys, definitely some shameless plugging, as I usually do. Shout out to my buddy Vaughn, Big VZA Dot, where you can find him. Maybe the Vaughn Westwood on Facebook, Big VZA Dot on all socials. He's definitely back to making beats, so definitely check him out. See about beats that you like. He usually puts beats up for free. And if there's a beat that you want to buy from him, definitely let him know. He'll be more than happy because he is definitely back in rare form. And I always say I always love people see people in their element and their talents, and that man is definitely in his bag. So definitely check him out. Of course, with me, guys, on all socials, you can find me, BlackFox447. I usually post a lot of things about movies, television, games I review, and also gym stuff because I do a couple push-ups. At the same time, guys, I'm all about positivity, pushing people forward, and just really hoping for people to really change the way, especially decency. I'm not asking to be good Samaritans. I'm just saying we could be a lot kinder to each other. Every one of us is going through a battle that nobody knows about. But if you just check on people that you know about, that you care about, let them know how you do it, how you make sure they're okay, you can do a lot more than just, be that moment where they can be caring, could possibly save a life. And also, it takes zero energy to be nice. It takes everything in you to be a dick. So don't be a dick. Simple as that. Of course, you see the links at the bottom. Let me make that just a little bit bigger. If you copy and paste that into your browser, we'll take you to my link tree that has the YouTube and Facebook groups for all my podcasts. How the Frack got here, get bit, of course, y'all from this podcast. Definitely check them out. Like, share, and subscribe, guys, as we're just trying to make these shows bigger. And like I said, it's things I like to enjoy. And also, all the stuff that we discussed here, if you have difference of opinions, if you think that there's nothing wrong with it, I want you to let me know. I want to keep that conversation going. My whole mission here is to get people involved, to get them informed and move them forward. If I'm doing that, then my purpose is fulfilled. But the last thing I'll say about how the Frack got here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information allow you to make up your own mind for yourself, but we provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot better in society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like, again, electing our first Black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first Black 4-star general in the U.S. Army. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up by your paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Please take care of yourselves and each other, and we will all get through this.